Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome all participants on YouTube to Design Systems Community Chapter Toronto Meetup number 10. And it is a lovely day outside. How are you, Lucy?
I'm great. I'm waiting for this to be over so I can go outside.
Let's go outside. Today's meetup is called Inside Design Systems, where we have special guests from Rangle to talk about their experiences working and helping with design systems. And today is March 30th, 2021. Before we begin, we start with a land acknowledgement. The land I am standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And everyone who's participating on YouTube, please respect our code of conduct. That is, respect others, keep it legal, play nice, and uphold the conduct and our values. And of course, protect your privacy. So welcome, and here's a brief introduction of us. We are the co-organizers of Design Systems Community Toronto. I am Enrico Sacchetti. Varun Jain cannot be here today, and we have Lucy.
Hey, everyone.
By the way, I'm a developer by trade, but I just love to talk about design systems. And how about yourself, Lucy?
Yeah, I'm Lucy. Hi, everyone. Designer at Shopify and working on the marketing team.
Yeah, and Varun, you're not here, but we miss you, and you're a product owner. So we like to keep everything related to design systems as diverse as possible. Also, today is an interactive meetup. So you have the opportunity to ask panelists questions after they give their introductions. We have two platforms to do this. You can use the YouTube comments if you like, and we'll pick up your questions unless they're already answered by our content. If you prefer to ask questions anonymously, you can use Slido. Hey, everyone. If you go to sli.do/719479, you can go to the Slido website and ask anonymous questions. The link is also down in the YouTube video description. Please take a look. And now let's go to our values. Design systems community is all about respecting and upholding certain values, because if you want to build and maintain design systems and uphold the community, we find that these 7 rules really help with that, which is accessibility, diversity and inclusivity, community and sharing, customer focus, collaborative working, bridging content, design, and code. You'll see some of that today. And of course, fun. You now have permission to have fun. Lucy, take us to our sponsors.
Yeah, so as usual, we wouldn't be able to do this without our awesome volunteers and sponsors. So thank you to Rangle and thank you to Scotiabank. So yeah, to stay connected with Rangle, please subscribe to their newsletter. If you want the latest information and news on their blogs, podcasts, or just general news on Rangle, that's how you can stay connected. Rangle is also hiring for various roles, so please, please, please check out their careers page. All the links will be posted on YouTube comments and on meetup.com.
Yes, thanks, Lucy. After the meetup is over, we'll post links on meetup.com.
So just for the agenda for today, we just went through some housekeepings. We'll be going through some introductions. At 12:10, the team will be going through Radius and their team experiences with designing design systems. And we will end it off with a panel discussion with Q&A, and then closing remarks at 1:15.
Thank you, Lucy. So now we're going to introduce our first guest. And then after they give a talk, we'll also introduce you to our many other guests. So everyone, please say hello to Rebecca Holland.
Hi, everyone. Really glad to be here. I won't introduce myself too much right now. I'll save that a little bit for the end. But I'm a senior manager of content strategy at Rangle, and I'm actually on the marketing team. But before I joined the marketing team, I was working on design systems. So I feel like I have to say that to sort of prove that I belong here and I'm not just a marketer. But I'm going to take everyone through Radius right now and just a brief overview of this design system accelerator. Yeah, any questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll try to address them afterwards.
Okay, we're glad to have you, Rebecca. So once Rebecca has their slides up, we will show you around Radius and what Rangle has.
Okay, can everyone see properly? I'm going to go ahead and assume that's a yes. So Radius, like I said, is what we call a design system accelerator. And so basically, an accelerator for Rangle is a sort of package tool that we can give to our clients in order to accelerate them, in order to get them closer to their outcomes faster. So Radius for us is a collection of open source tools and libraries that we use to build design systems faster. And it takes the guesswork out of building design systems for our clients. So it's not that Radius is a complete design system. It's actually just a very baseline level of a few components and decision-making that clients will need in order to stand up a design system on their own or in partnership with us. So the biggest and most important thing about Radius, I think, for Rangle is that it's open source. So that's really important to us as a company to keep our tooling, our accelerators, things like this available to the community. So anybody can go on the on Radius on our website, check it out, look at the tools and resources that are available there. And literally anybody could use Radius to stand up their own design system at their company. So a little bit about what's included in Radius. So there's the design kit, which is built and maintained in Figma. Figma is actually one of our partners. We really do believe in this tool, and we think it is best in class for design. So the foundational components and a reference architecture are kept in the design kit there. Our component library is also built and maintained in Figma. So this includes, again, the foundational components and the reference architecture. Storybook is where we keep our documentation and our developer sandbox. Again, this is another best-in-class tool that is definitely our opinion of the best one to use for design systems. And then we also have all our quality and testing, visual regression testing with Chromatic, continuous integration with Circle CI, and Netlify builds and deploy Storybook. So that's a brief overview of what's included in Radius. Oh, sorry, there's my cat. Like I said before, there's actually only, I believe, about 10 components that are in Radius because it's meant to be very lightweight and a way to allow companies or teams to start a design system quickly. One of the other things about Radius is that it isn't just the components, and it's not about the components. It's about building the foundation for a complete design system. It's also meant to be quick start, like I say here. The decisions on tooling, architectural patterns, and the documentation is already built in. And it includes the automated QA. All the designs and foundational components are built to AA accessibility standards. And the other point about Radius that's really important is that it's ready for building any kind of greenfield application. So it's not just about standing up a design system, but if there's a team that actually wants to start building an application and then scale a design system later based on that, Radius is ready to do that for you. A little bit about what Radius is not. It's more than a library. It's, like I said, it's built to be used. It's not a complete design system, like I said. It's just a sort of foundation, or what, again, like I said, we call an accelerator. One of the great things about Radius, I think, is that it doesn't fence you in. Like I said, you can use it immediately to build an application, and then you can stand up your design system later. So it's really great for teams that are scaling or organizations that are trying to build new applications to, best-in-class standards. With that being said, it's not over-architected. And like I said, it's purposely not complete. Part of the reason for that, to be very honest, is that Radius really is a marketing tool for us. We want people to get excited about Radius. We want them to start using it. And then, we do want them to say, hey, we need help to actually turn this into a full design system. And so, we're ready to jump in with a potential client then and understand where they are in the process of building a design system and actually help them see it through all the way. So, this is the why of Radius. It's not meant to be complete on its own. Rangle is different from product companies, of course. As an agency, we're building design systems for other people. We're not, just building our own internal design system and then kind of planting it on all of our clients. As you'll hear from everybody else on the team, every time we build a design system, it's a new experience. And it's not that we take Radius and we just build it for everyone else. Actually, to be completely honest with you guys, we haven't had an opportunity to use Radius yet, but I really hope that we will soon. And it is a really fabulous tool. I really encourage everyone to check it out on our website. And with that being said, I will transition into talking a little bit about my experience now, and then talking about one of our most major design system clients. So without naming names, this client was a large retailer based in Japan. If you look really hard, you'll probably figure out who it is, but of course we're not allowed to say. So working with this retailer over the course of, I believe, the past 2 years, we created the first fully responsive component library for the brand. In the end, we delivered 173 components, including recipes, templates, and variations. This covered 95% of the use cases across their platform. This is probably not what we would call a best-in-class practice. I will say, and I think you'll maybe hear this echoed by some of the other people on the team, we might have over-architected just a little bit. But this was a great learning experience for me. So I'll sort of transition to talking about my experience with design systems. This was my first ever design system project, and I rolled onto this project not even knowing what a design system was. So I really had to hit the ground running, and being part of this team for, I believe, about the last 6 months of the project, I saw how fast we could move and really what Rangle could do to stand up a design system for a really large multinational retailer, and really covering, like I said, all those use cases that a multinational company would have. And so one of the biggest outcomes of this project was that the developers in the company were actually able to build features on their website 80% faster than their previous building from scratch. This is a quick look at the documentation site. This is, mostly where I was working as a content person. So my role in the project was to define all the documentation and really ensure that it was not only accessible and easy to understand, but the biggest thing for me is that I knew that this documentation was going to be used by people who spoke English as a second language. And so it was really important to me to be sure that the documentation was clear and easy to use. As you guys know, a documentation site is like a user manual for a design system. And so if the user manual is not good, if it's like stereo instructions from the 80s, nobody's going to use it, and that's really going to impact the adoption of the design system. So it was important for me and for the whole team to make sure that the documentation site was as easy to use as possible, and very clear and very explicit in how to use each component. So like I said, the sort of biggest outcome from this website was that there was an 80% faster feature build. And, that's a really great statistic, not just for us at Rangle to say this is how we can enable design systems, but also for the company to know that they really did do their best to ensure that the design system was actually meeting their use cases and meeting the needs of the team that were developing the website. So I think right now I'd like to pass it over to Mitch, and he was on the design system with me. And I also just want to give Mitch a shout out because he was also the person on this design system build who, answered most of my questions while I was learning what a design system was. So, Mitch, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Rebecca. It was a lot of fun working on this. Yeah, so I'm an Agile quality analyst at Rangle. I've been here for just over 3 years. And I would say the majority of my time has been working on some form of design system or component library. We can leave the slides up, actually, and we can kind of skip to the next one if possible. But I did want to talk a little bit about how we kind of think of quality holistically at Rangle in general, but specifically with a lens on design systems. So we often start an engagement or a kickoff with a overall quality strategy. That's not surprising, but this often takes the form of an artifact. It's kind of like a living document. It allows us to have conversations with our clients and also broaden the definition of quality outside of just like traditional testing activities that people often associate with it. It helps people really feel kind of involved in the process, and that makes it clear how they contribute to this like holistic view of quality. So we can imagine this being like a document that we then talk about. Some of the things that would be contained within are roles and responsibilities. We work with a lot of enterprise clients that have a lot of hierarchy and separation between a lot of these groups. But working at Rangle, we often work in cross-functional teams. We have developers and designers and quality practitioners and content all working on the same team, product managers. And that can be a little bit hard for people to kind of like make that mind shift. So we like to identify like, here are the various roles, here how they can contribute, here are the types of things you should be thinking about, and here's the types of things that we're relying on to help foster this quality product and like deliver quality product at the end of the day. Another part is business issues that impact quality. This is actually a key one for getting stakeholders and product owners engaged and making them, allowing them to inject their context and their expertise in their business and surfacing issues that we might not be aware of potentially. It's also a place that we can ask questions. I think the common example that I see again and again is working with like DevOps in an environment. So we're often a team that's kind of isolated, and we need stakeholders and champions to make these connections with us initially, so that we can kind of deploy our application in general in some cases, right? And so building out a test environment, things like that, so we can raise these issues as business issues that they can take away and work on and work on for us on our behalf. This next one, scope of testing, this is what you would probably expect. Sorry, we can keep that. This is what you would probably expect often on any sort of a quality-related discussion. So it covers types of testings that we're going to prioritize, types of testing activities, the types of browsers and devices and breakpoints that are being tested, whether we're going to have any sort of test automation, what our recommendations are there. It's something we often have a strong influence on. And then accessibility, I highlight this here. There's a whole slide on it afterwards, which I will briefly get up on a soapbox on to talk about. But I wanted to mention here that this is, again, even though that we have a lot of expertise in building enterprise scale applications, I want to highlight one example of where the client was able to add some context given the international nature of this. The statistics for like browser usage and what browsers are more popular in this region were actually like kind of surprising. One, like A11 was way more common than it is in North America, but there was actually like full browsers that we hadn't really been aware of that were actually super popular. This one called, I think, UC browser. It's made by Alibaba Group in China, and it's I think it was like one of the top 10 downloaded apps in the 2010s or something. Something like, it was like mind-blowing stat. It kind of gives you perspective on the need for this sort of collaboration and communication between stakeholders. Like, we cannot be an island, especially working with these different organizations all the time. We capture risks and mitigations. This kind of goes with the second point. But this is highlights the living nature of this sort of document, so that we're always in conversation with our clients to make sure that like risks are being captured, they're being identified, they're being mitigated against proactively. This all kind of lives under this sort of umbrella. And I mentioned a couple other things: test deliverables and bug reporting standards. These have an increased importance in a consulting engagement where you're often handing things off, right? Or in the case of bug reporting standards, you have consuming teams that you want to surface issues. Like if they're having issues, you want them to be able to surface them in a way that you can actually action. So things like adding the right reproduction steps, making sure, calling out that you need to add a video of this, or what component we're using specifically. It's like information that might be specific to a particular design system. But all that kind of lives here, and it's something that, again, we can talk about at the beginning. The whole team can be involved, and it's kind of like a tacit agreement that like we're all agreeing to do these things to help ensure the quality together, which is pretty fun for sure. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more accessibility. We can go to the next slide quickly, and I'll probably not to take up too much time, but I think it's becoming much more common that accessibility is vital to every project. Designing and developing experiences for it, I think it takes even more of an importance on a design system that's possible, because you're building the building blocks that end user experiences will utilize. One of my coworkers who worked on this project with me, AJ, she wrote a good blog, kind of like capturing some of the things that a design system can do to support accessibility, but a lot of things that have to be done at the implementation stage. And she has a great quote saying, a design system can't be accessible itself, rather like a design system should enable accessibility, which we definitely learned along the way, and it has to factor into a lot of like the research and documentation and education that you're doing along the way. There's kind of a misconception that if we make an accessible design system, then our experiences will be accessible, and that's generally not the case. But design system things under design system purview, such as choosing high contrast colors, so like our brand color is AA or AAA accessible on a white background and a black background, something like that. Considering how users can navigate via keyboard or via screen reader, and these sorts of things will get you some of the way there. But even components that are accessible can be used in inaccessible ways. And AJ goes into a lot more detail as to the examples. I would definitely strongly encourage you to check it out. In the end, there's a very few people that have deep experience in making accessible end user interfaces. Documentation in your design system, going to a particular component page and being able to see, here's some accessible do's and don'ts, like how to use ARIA labels effectively, things like that. If you're not going to have a visible label for an icon, you need to specify a property so that if a user can't see this, they understand what it still is and is able to be read out by a screen reader, for example. And all this is in service of trying to build an experience and enable accessible experiences to the broadest set of users. It's something that I didn't really have much experience with, to be honest, before working on this project, and I was able to grow and get a lot of experience and really feel like you were making an impact in that area. And it's definitely something I'd like to impress on everyone watching. So that's I guess that's a brief overview of a couple of the highlights of my learnings on design systems. I think I'll pass it over to Matthew to talk about his experiences next.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. Hi, everyone. So I'm a product manager at Rangle, and for the last year and a half, or maybe just more than that, I've been working on a design system team with a major American airline as our client. So I actually have added a slide here about the role and responsibility of a product manager on a design system team, but I'll speak a little bit about that now. So the way I think of my role on the team is that it's sort of my responsibility to make sure the team is working on solving the biggest or most important problems. And so that could mean within the design system itself, but it could also mean because the design system is sort of inherently a digital transformation project, it could mean identifying points of friction within the organization itself. It could mean identifying usability issues with the design system and making sure that teams are able to use the design system effectively or efficiently. It definitely means being able to prioritize requests coming in from product teams, which are ultimately solving end user problems or business problems, and sort of being able to balance all of that. So on the project that I've been working on, one of the major challenges that we saw within the organization is just this amount of friction sort of between how roles work together and how product teams work together. And so one of the main focuses for us has been to try to reduce that friction. And we try to do that by sort of elevating what started as a component library, so just code, shared components and code, elevating that to a more fully fledged design system, sort of getting in with designers and developers and that sort of handoff stage, and helping them to work together, collaborate more easily, and just improve that overall workflow. If we go to the next slide, some of the challenges on the team that we've been working through. Like I said, we started as a component library. We also started only supporting one team. And so over the last couple of years, we've been working to scale that to support multiple product teams, each with their own set of problems that they're solving, their own priorities, their own timelines, and their own sort of slice of the user journey. And sort of how do we balance that? How do we enable these teams to evolve the design system as they need it? How do we make sure we're not blocking them on important features that they need to get out? How do we provide support to their developers and designers? How do we manage all of these things? And the other challenge is, like I said, just driving code and design quality. So that's just making sure that the design system can be used effectively, that designers on product teams and developers on product teams are able to sort of elevate their thinking, so they're not worrying about padding within a button. Instead, they can worry about solving their product challenges and end user challenges. And so some ways that we do that, well, early on, we really tried to focus on getting each of these product teams communicating with each other and with us. And we do that through regular design reviews and just sort of encouraging everyone to keep the lines of communication open, make sure that we're planning together, make sure that everyone's sort of brought into the discussion, and we all feel that we're building out this design system together, for ourselves, for the entire organization. Building a roadmap together as well. This organization follows SAFe, which as part of that, which is scaled Agile. As part of that, every quarter you bring the whole organization together to plan out your next quarter, essentially. And so what that means is that every 3 months, all of these teams are able to get together, talk about our roadmap for the near term, identify our dependencies across teams, identify priorities, and really work together to make sure that we all sort of agree on what our timelines are and how we are delivering to each of those teams, and just making sure that we're solving the right problems in the right order. And then the other way that we are solving these challenges is by bringing transparency into the system. And so one way that we're doing that is to actually move over to Figma, which Rebecca talked about. And it's a design system first tool. It introduces transparency into the design process. It encourages collaboration. It allows developers to come in to the tool very easily and to see exactly what the intent behind the designs are, which is a challenge that we saw developers on product teams were experiencing. And yeah, things like that. So we'll talk about, I think, more about that during the Q&A portion, but that's just sort of a high-level summary of some of my experiences on the design system at Rangle. I'm not sure who's next, so but I think I'll pass it back to you, Lucy.
Lucy, try again without your mic muted.
Sorry. I was just saying thank you for talking about all your experiences. And yeah, I think now we just welcome back the team and also introduce the other team members on the Rangle team. So Nick, as well as Katrina, maybe just if you guys can do a quick introduction on yourselves, starting with Katrina.
Sure. So my name is Katrina Rempel. I'm a lead UX designer here at Rangle. Something you might have gathered from sort of the slide so far is, we work on such a wide range of design systems here as an agency. And so each of us probably has very different experience, and it's probably a lot for each one of us to go into the design systems that we're all working on. But I'll just kind of summarize by saying, within the past couple of years, I've worked on, say, like 3 different design systems. 2 of them were for major financial organizations in Canada. And the other was for a company that does surveys. So those were the 3 like very different experiences, although there's kind of always similar challenges, often kind of related to process and how to get people to work together and collaborate. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, and there'll probably be more questions at the Q&A, and I'll maybe pass it to Nick.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Nick Adams. I'm a developer at Rangle. I've been there for about 2 and a bit years. In that time, I've worked on a handful of design systems and a lot of just focusing. My role, I've been quite focused on the component, developing or implementing the component libraries. Clients such as banks, healthcare, like medical devices, payment providers, and some kind of software as a service administrative tools that are sort of all fairly widely used. So I hope that I'm going to be sort of, all the answers that I give, any information that I give will be based on my experience across those systems. And I hope that any information that I have is useful to anybody, and I hope to learn something too.
Nice. Well, thank you. Welcome, Rangle team. We have a lot of questions. So we'll start off, Enrico, with the first question.
Yes, thank you very much. And I like how this layout of guests here is almost T-shaped, kind of like the diversity of your roles. This is good. And I'd like to proudly announce that everyone is introduced and everyone is here. Thank you for making it. So the first question we have for today goes as follows. How common is it for agencies to use open source design systems? And this is we sourced our questions before the meetup began, so this comes from you, the people. Nick, would you like to get started on this question?
All right, thank you. So basically, it's in my experience, it's not that common for customers to use open source design systems right off the bat. A lot of the time, basically what happens is when we begin their client engagement, often they've already started to roll their own design system. And often then what happens is they might be incorporating libraries and tools into it. Like just a random example, they might use a styling system like Style Components or Tailwind or something like that. But usually fundamentally the whole thing is, most of it is kind of their own design from their own implementation from scratch. And often what happens then is that it kind of runs out of momentum because of a lack of resources on their side, or they just need some help on taking it further. And that's usually, in my experience, where we've kind of picked up, and started working with them to like continue the implementation of a design system. Sometimes that means that there's some stuff in there that's we think that they shouldn't have included, or some kind of patterns or libraries or strategies that they shouldn't use. And basically how successful we are with getting them to let go of those or pick up different systems that we'd recommend just often has to do with the amount of influence with the client that we've managed to shore up in that engagement or in any previous engagements. I think that if we do manage to, if we can't basically convince them to let go of something that's not going to help them, or pick up something that they really need to help them, like some kind of a strategy implementation, then that's kind of one of the biggest, that can be one of the biggest difference makers. Like how much trust we have with the client and how well we can convince them to use or not use a certain strategy really has a huge amount of influence on how much success we can have in that particular engagement.
Okay, thanks for your response. If anyone else would like to pitch in on that, feel free to do so now. and that includes audience members and guests. If also audience members, I see you're discussing something very fun. If you go to meetup.com's event page, you can also add comments below the event, and we can also discuss these outside hours, and that's fine too. Thank you. Lucy, you may continue.
Yeah, so the next question is, I guess I can imagine working with various clients, and each product and experience can be vastly different. So yeah, Matt, I was just wondering, like, what is the ROI on design systems for an agency?
Sure. So I can kind of interpret that two ways. One is, what is the ROI for us having Radius? And the other is, how do we communicate the ROI to our clients when we're building out design systems with them? So I'll try to touch on both. For Radius, I mean, really the benefit that we get out of that is that we can deliver more value to clients sooner. And so the return for us is that our clients are happier. They're seeing more value come out through Rangle. They may, be able to get to market sooner. We may be able to kind of help them deliver on their end sooner, which is that's great for us and it's great for them. And then just as a business, they may renew with us. They may come back when they have other things that they want to work on in the future. They may help us land new business, those kinds of things. And then from a client perspective, I can speak to what my team sort of communicates as the return on investment. And this will be different for every client or every organization that's building out a design system. But for us, for our client, what really resonates is savings. And so we communicate how much development time we're saving, how much design time we can help save, and ultimately how much money the design system can potentially be helping them to save. Last time we calculated this, over the few years that we had been building out the design system, we had saved the organization 600 days of development effort alone. And so that's a pretty, that number really resonates, especially these days for an airline.
Nice. Yeah, it's I can see how definitely it's beneficial just from like a cost savings perspective as well as like efficiency for the team. So yeah.
There's of course other less tangible metrics as well. You could measure brand cohesion, brand perception, things like that. That would be maybe more qualitative measurements that you could do through user interviews or customer interviews and things like that. And for some companies, that might be the best way to go if that's what their goal for the design system is. So there's many different sort of options on how you can best communicate ROI.
For sure. Enrico, next question.
Well, first, let's give Katrina a chance. Did you want to add on to that?
Oh,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add another example to that too. There was actually one design system I worked with recently where they had a very, very concrete example of the ROI, which was they gave the example of like what the effort was for the team to simply change the color of one button across the entire application. And when they calculated it, because their application had been split out into so many different fragments, and none of them were using the same component, it ended up being like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for all these various teams to integrate that change of just simply updating the button color. And when that brand was looking at potentially doing a rebrand in the next year, the ROI was kind of a very obvious argument to make. So yeah.
Nice.
All right, thanks for that, Katrina. And I'm going to do this for no reason. Hello. Are you ready for the next question? It is about content strategy. This is also sourced from our audience members. How or what is content strategy's role in working with design systems? Let's get started with Rebecca.
I feel like first that might be just someone reacting to my current title, which is on the marketing side rather than what I was doing with design systems. But certainly I can speak to my experience there. So like I said, I came into Rangle about 2 years ago to first work with our retailer design system. And my primary role there was doing the documentation. And like I spoke to before, it was really important for me to make sure that this kind of user manual I was creating for the design system was actually going to be adopted. So like I said, this retailer, their team was based in Japan, but they also had some offshore developers who were based in India. So I knew that, those second language challenges could be really significant if we weren't creating a design system that was as clear and easy to understand as possible. I would say as well, outside of those barriers, working within the team was actually really important. I remember one of our designers saying to me as I was working on documentation with him one day, "This is like design system therapy." And so I really think that someone who's creating the documentation, you are a little bit of a team therapist. I came into this design system, like I said, a little bit late, the last 6 months that we were building. And getting some of that documentation was actually a matter of kind of digging into people's memories for components they might have created, 6 months previous. So the process of doing the documentation wasn't just about creating that user manual, but it also actually helped the team uncover some additional issues or challenges that the components had, and maybe variations that we hadn't uncovered yet. When you come in to do the documentation, especially me coming in as a real novice, asking, stupid questions, it actually did help the team uncover some issues, because I would say, well, what about this, and why not that? And so I think that's the power of content and documentation within a design system. It's not just a user manual. It's also a gut check, in the way that quality is a gut check, to ensure that the design system is going to be used properly. And, documentation is really, it's kind of like advocating for the user. Whoever's going to be the end user of the design system, the documentation's got to work for them. So I was coming at it from that side rather than coming at it from the side of, being the one who actually created the design system. So yeah, I would say that was kind of my biggest role in the design systems I've worked on.
Thanks for that detailed response, Rebecca. I can totally relate to how, especially at an agency setting where you're making more than one design system for multiple clients, I can see how maybe some folks in the audience can relate to trying to get an understanding continuously all the time, forever, and then multiplying that per client. That gives us the agency perspective a little bigger. Thank
Absolutely.
you for that. Yeah. So with that said, let's continue. Lucy.
Yeah, I think this next question, maybe Nick, you can answer. What are your challenges versus your client challenges? I guess working in design systems in an agency sort of setting.
So thank you. So basically, sorry, give me one minute here. So it's often because we work with different clients, we'll often have the same challenges, coming up over and over again. So we start to see a pretty strong pattern with what the usual challenges are. And the ones that I've encountered often are basically to do with silos. So often the teams that are working on the day-to-day features, like the product teams, are often siloed away from the developers and the designers and the UX people that are advocating and advancing the agenda of a design system within an organization. So sometimes there will be a kind of a misunderstanding whereby there's a core team doing a design system or trying to put one together, trying to implement a component library, and what they're doing is not really in touch with the needs of the product teams. And because the product teams don't have components that really meet their needs, they then are sort of cloning the components or kind of re-implementing them themselves and sort of making a whole lot of changes, which sort of defeats the whole point of having a component library that everybody uses. So that's often a challenge. There's often a challenge with getting buy-in from business leaders because, and I believe somebody was mentioning something in the comments a little earlier on about getting buy-in from business leadership. Often the design system looks like something that's kind of maybe a good to have, nice to have. It's fancy and expensive, and it's a big additional thing. And it's very important to convince the business leadership that actually design system is something that makes everything easier and it pares everything down. It makes things smoother, makes everything cost less, but you really have to make a convincing case for it because it's kind of quite a complicated big sort of circle that sort of feeds into itself with all the little bits and pieces of it. So it's very important to communicate what it will achieve to business leadership. There's sometimes a fundamental misunderstanding of what a modern component library should do and how it should be architected. Like, I've worked on an engagement where there was an existing component library and they told us, we've got a big component library and we need your help with it. And then when we started working on it, we realized that what we kind of expected to be kind of functional or dumb components, visual components that were composable, was actually a very big library of widgets that were very specifically designed for end use cases. And the widget architecture was very stateful. It was very much like sort of what jQuery UI widgets used to do about 10 years ago. So what we had there was kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of what a modern like a component library, how it should be architected and how it should be composable. I've had various flavors of that problem working on different engagements. There's also sometimes old habits that teams have. For example, you might develop a component and then there might be a lot of people still wanting to do things like pixel push with end user implementations. People from the design team saying to people in the development team, like, oh, move that over a little bit, change that border a tiny bit, without going through the kind of the communication process of having a component, having like an agreed upon design for that component. So that's often another challenge. And I think, those are basically the ones I see over and over again. It's kind of leadership buy-in, old habits, fundamental misunderstandings of what modern component libraries do and how they're architected, and silos.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to have a design system and to think that it's going to solve all the problems, but it's the job that you guys do is not just creating this design system, but also advocating for it and digging into workflows and how people use it and understanding how they'll use it and what they need it for. And so digging into those problem areas and trying to provide some solutions for that, and not just building a design system and handing it over the fence.
I find as a developer, I often think I'm going to be really kind of focused on the technical implementation only. And what I found is that over time, the things that really make the difference and the things that actually end up consuming most of your time are not the hard or specific technical implementation, but actually the organizational change, the soft aspect of it. Yeah. It's quite political, and it's that's definitely finessing that is definitely the thing that I think makes the biggest difference for success or failure.
Yeah, I know when I was working on design systems, it felt like you were kind of the glue that connected teams and connected people and talking together, and you were just kind of orchestrating it all and connecting folks. Great. Is there any other questions or comments?
Matthew, you can go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So I just wanted to add a couple more challenges that I had thought of. One is that when you have a design system that is becoming successful, and what I mean by that is that teams are starting to want to adopt it, you actually have the problem that now you have to start saying no to some things because too many teams want too many things from you, and you only have so many people and so much time that you can spend building out new components or new patterns or new features for those teams. And then learning how to sort of prioritize what you're going to work on next and for what reason. And another is sort of along those same lines, balancing the needs of product teams, of consuming product teams, with sort of the usability of the design system overall. And so a product team might want to build out this new feature, which requires an update to a component, and maybe that feature is going to be really impactful for end users. But at the same time, that maybe the documentation site needs an uplift. Maybe devs or designers are finding it difficult to find a particular set of information within the documentation site, and that's actually making it really difficult to use the design system for them. So how do you prioritize those against each other? How do you kind of balance those? And then from that's sort of a design system team challenge, but from an agency perspective, a challenge that we have is that we're actually we're a third party to this organization, right? To our client. And so part of our work is just sort of getting access to the right people within the organization, learning about other product teams, because there could be teams that we as a third party aren't aware of. Maybe they intentionally haven't shared it with us because maybe it's like an internal, I don't want to use the word secret, but maybe they just aren't sharing it publicly. Or maybe it's just sort of accidental that we haven't had a reason to have access to this other team yet, but sort of revealing that information, discovering teams that could potentially use the design system in the future that we could start, figuring out how to support now is a challenge as an agency.
Nice. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for the insightful things. I feel like what you guys face as challenges, like in-house teams also face the same sort of things. But yeah, you guys get to see like the patterns that kind of reoccur. Awesome. Enrico, next question.
Sure. Also, I want to share something, a gift to you, the YouTube audience. Nick, thanks to your detailed explanation, I also learned that you wrote a blog post for Rangle about the top 3 business benefits of a design system. So I would like to share that with everybody in the chat. There you go. Please take a look. So moving on to the following question. This is about remote work and quite topical. It's 2021. People are even more remote now, but I would imagine as an agency, you are already remote with your clients. But the question now is, how do you communicate and collaborate with clients and partners, especially now that everything is remote and your members are physically isolated or differentiated from each other? So let's talk first to that, Katrina.
Sure. Yeah, definitely very topical. Yeah, we certainly had clients, before COVID who we worked with remotely, but we've also had clients that we worked with in person. So we certainly faced and still face some challenges. Similar to all the other tech companies who've had to go through this, of course, relying on communication tools like, Zoom, Slack, et cetera, are great best practices, and also becoming a little bit more, forward in your communication, like things that you could maybe just let slide and wait for that conversation to come up in the break room or something. Like those conversations aren't going to happen naturally. So I feel like it's really great to make space for those types of more organic conversations to happen. Sometimes we'll have like an open like Zoom link or something that team members can join. To maybe give a few more concrete examples of how this would apply to a design system. I guess for me as a designer, I love any kind of whiteboarding tools. We used to whiteboard even like components in the office. Like you would draw out like the actual component and like talk about it on a whiteboard. We can't do that remotely, but we can use tools like Mural or Envision Freehand. So as a designer, I love using those tools. Recently, I've been working with a team who they have a team of 4 designers, and they each kind of work a little bit siloed on different features of the same application. So we've been utilizing Freehand Envision, which if you're not familiar with it, it's just kind of like a big whiteboard where you can put your designs, and we'll literally just like place the designs there. And like as designers are maybe coming up with new components, maybe one designer has come up with a new component and another designer is solving for the same type of feature, and they've, perhaps built a very similar looking component. We'll do something like kind of use Freehand to be like, okay, let's compare these two. Let's decide on kind of like, one structure for this component or one design with all the sort of different challenges in mind. And I don't know, that type of visual whiteboarding tool really helps for kind of surfacing the kind of, I don't know, nitty-gritty level of details when you're actually designing components, like things like where should the close button be, or what color should the outline be, and just stuff like that.
Interesting response. One thing I picked out of that in particular was before the, what do I call this? The extra common era, let's call it that. But before then, things like organic communication could happen more easily, and people have the time and energy for checklist meetings where you need to get all the information out before you leave. But it sounds like in your example, you need to be a bit more choosy about that, because we're all learning to be more empathetic and mindful of our energy levels. And when certain bits of information can be dismissed for now and returned to at a later date. And I guess that is no exception to client work. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also dependent on, the size of the team we're working with. And in this case, the team has a lot of pressure and deliverables, and you always have to be mindful of that and mindful of making sure that you're not overloading people with meetings and that they can't get their actual work done.
For sure. Thank you. Mitch, would you like to continue that?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I wanted to mention that, at least at my experience at Rangle, like Rangle works with, companies all over the globe, right? I think every project I've worked on here has not been with a client that's been local to Toronto. So we've already been kind of experiencing this kind of remote work possibility. It's been easier in some ways, because if you can imagine, in the before times, if you're working from home and the rest of your team is in the office, it can be a little bit difficult to feel like you're involved in the process, right? But now that, we're all remote, we all need to set up, meetings to discuss things, and we can more readily include the client in those meetings as well, and kind of also lean into some of these more asynchronous tools that the client is already involved in, so like utilizing Slack and utilizing Jira, whereas a lot of the conversations, we get a lot of good work done in an office setting where we can work closely with someone, but then maybe the decision that comes out of that, it doesn't actually get surfaced to the client, even though they might have, context to add or decisions, and a lot of that gets kind of lost. So we're more likely to use these tools that help us stay connected remotely as a result of kind of the situation that we're in.
Great, thanks for
Curious.
Lucy,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was actually curious about like time zones and stuff. I know you mentioned like one client was in Japan. Like, how did you guys kind of, work with that?
Yeah, and that's a good point. If a client's kind of like in the opposite time zone, it is kind of difficult to find time, but still making it a priority to have those kind of in-person touch points is important. I think when we were working on our project, even, this was before we had meetings, at least once a week with designers and once a week with developers, and demos and things like that, where you can get that kind of immediate feedback and have more like high bandwidth communication, and to discuss a particular issue. It's also a standing point to have questions answered and things like that. But it is definitely difficult when time zones are so opposite. We had some like evening meetings and things like that. But I think the benefit of those meetings outweighed the cost of doing them. But it's definitely a little bit challenging at times. But
That makes sense. So the next question is around adoption. I know, I guess in-house teams, they have their own set of adoption challenges, but you guys also are coming in from like an agency perspective and creating design systems for potential clients, and there could be resistance as far as adoption. So I was just wondering, maybe Katrina, you can talk about the common barriers of adoption just from an agency perspective.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We do for sure see the same exact challenges as in-house teams see. From an agency perspective, one thing that's actually been kind of interesting is there's been a little bit of a shift in maybe like mentality around design systems in the past few years, at least that I've seen. I think before we used to see, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a little bit of concern that like a design system kind of takes the creativity away from the designer, or that it even like in some cases there would be concern that like it takes away designers' jobs because, oh, you have this design system, what do you need a designer for? But we obviously know that that's not true. A design system is just kind of a toolkit. So where we used to see resistance about people being concerned that the design system might, impact the design team in that type of way, that's kind of been alleviated a little bit. We don't get those types of questions anymore, which is great to see. That said, there's always barriers and resistance. We never want to have teams feel like we're imposing like a certain creative vision or creative direction on them that they don't agree with. Like, it's really important that the approach we take is always very collaborative. So, you know, we try to approach it like we're just here to kind of enable and accelerate the team. You know, even with that, when I work with other designers, it's not about like my design versus their design. It's like, how do we make sure that, you know, designers are making the right considerations, that they're thinking about use cases. We're never trying to impose something on the team that doesn't benefit them. So I think taking that collaborative approach is really helpful in, you know, letting the team know that you're working with, know that you're there to help them and to support them, and that you're not there to kind of, you know, just throw their designs out and replace it with something else, right? That's entirely not what we do. Yeah. Maybe another quick point on that is it's also really, really important, like because we're an agency and we're an outside organization, we always need, I would call it kind of like some type of internal sponsor, like someone on the client side who is the one driving that initiative forward. And that sponsor might be a different role at every org. It could be like a design ops person, it could be a UX director, could even be someone in like product or technology or a completely different discipline. But, you know, like that person is typically the one who's sort of driving that adoption internally too, because that has to come from within the organization. It can't come just from us.
Yeah, I find that definitely helps to have like champions or advocates internally to like help share and spread the message. Someone who has like that shared passion or drive to have a design system and advocate for it on your behalf.
Yeah, and get the team excited around it too.
Yeah, exactly. Enrico, next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. There's, I like all these synonyms: sponsor, advocate, champion, and I've used one in the past, ambassador. These are all great because maybe I wonder if any on the Rangle team has experienced this moment, the moment where you walk into a room and say, "Don't be afraid, your job is safe. I am here, and the tedium is gone, and now you can do your jobs even better." Like, have you had those moments?
I'd say the first half maybe, but you never want to approach it like, oh, like we're here to do your job. Like that's, you know, it's always a delicate balance, and we want to be really respectful of the people that we work with and understanding that the fears that they might bring into those conversations are real, and that we should never discredit it, and we should always be mindful of what we say and how we work with those organizations.
Yeah, I appreciate the correction actually, because the more impersonal, the better, by the sounds of it. Okay, very good. Let's continue on. The next one is about tooling. So when it comes to tooling, how does Rangle choose their tools with their clients? I would assume that Rangle has their favorite tools and the clients has their preferred tools, and mixing these together could be a challenge. So Rebecca, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I can absolutely speak to that. So I would say, by and large, you know, kind of echoing what Katrina was just saying, we're not there to impose our ideas on the clients. We really want to support them, including, you know, tools that they use that are working for their processes. So I would say, yes, absolutely, Rangle has favorite tools, and I can speak to some of those in a minute. But if the tooling and the technologies that a client has already works for them, and we're not seeing that they're getting stuck with those tools, we're absolutely ready to adopt those tools ourselves and work with them. So, you know, I say that is the most important thing for me to then segue into saying we do have partnerships with certain tooling companies. I mentioned Figma is one of them already. And, you know, like we've all said, it is a best-in-class tool for design systems, and that's why we love using it so much. It's also great for remote work, like we were mentioning. But, you know, we're also partnered with InVision as well, and Sketch is certainly a tool that we use a great deal with clients. We have a partnership with Contentful, the CMS platform. We use Contentful for our own website, and we've used it plenty of times for standing up websites for our clients as well. So while we have opinions about tools, we're ready to be kind of tool agnostic, and the most important thing is for us to get the job done right for the client.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Did you want to add on to that, Mitch?
Yeah, I definitely just want to echo that. It's really important to meet the clients kind of where they are, working within their particular set of tools. They, again, working with these big companies, they often have a very established process, and you can't go in and try to blow it all up and kind of bring in all the things from Radius, for example. I would say that you kind of have to be adaptable. That's a super key trait that Rangle teams need to be able to kind of like assess the situation and then try to kind of pull things up as time goes by. We develop more trust with our clients. We're able to understand their business better, which I think is a big part of it, and understand how their specific business works, and be able to make these little suggestions to kind of improve their process, leveraging experience we've had in the past. I would say, one in the testing realm, at least, a lot of people know they want like test automation, for example, but they don't know exactly what tools to use. So that's actually an area where I feel like we do have a lot of control, at least in the projects that I've worked on, is talking to them about visual regression testing options and test automation and things like that, where they really are looking for us to provide our expertise based on is this tool robust enough to handle all these different use cases that we've seen across projects. But yeah, I would say in general, we probably 95% of the time we have to work within the confines of what they're bringing to the table initially.
I see. So it sounds like Rangle has a preferred kit of tools, and if there's ever a discrepancy with the client, everything is negotiable. Everything deserves qualitative analysis, and then you can proceed with either their tools or even a third unconsidered tool. So it sounds like in the agency setting, it's always adaptive. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the adaptiveness, like the nature of it is key for sure. We have to be not married to any particular tool, and being able to work with a variety of different things based on what the client prefers or what they're kind of invested in.
Makes sense to me. Thank you, Mitch.
Nice. So I have a question. I think when we initially started conversations about doing this meetup, someone had said, playbooks don't work. We need to apply solutions based on the client. So I was just curious to dig into this question a little bit. And I don't know, what are your perspectives on playbooks? Maybe Rebecca?
Yep. So I think that echoes exactly what we were just saying about tooling. We never give the clients, our playbook. Like I said before, we don't just impose Radius on our clients and then go, okay, cool, you've got what you need now. We're always like in sympathy with our clients. We're when our sales team and our digital innovation team first meets with a client, we're really doing our best to ensure that we understand their context and we get as fulsome a picture about their business and their business challenges as possible. So, it really is about meeting them where they are. And so, unlike, and I don't mean to disparage any like larger agencies, but unlike a McKinsey, for example, we're not just going to say like, okay, this is the best practice, this is the best way to do these things, and so this is what we're going to recommend to you. We really are seeing every client as an individual business and, an individual set of problems for us to solve together. We don't say this is the Rangle way. We say, this is the way for our clients, and we really co-create solutions together. So as much as we have, obviously as an agency, we do have best practices. We do have kind of internal playbooks. It's always around what the client needs most. And, I think one of the things that probably everybody here is proud of is the fact that we've never given a client a kind of out of the box solution and just sort of washed our hands of it.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice to hear. It's almost treating like each thing as a product that you're kind of understanding the user, understanding their needs, and then, yeah, creating a solution for them that works best.
Yep, definitely.
Alrighty. Our next question comes from Slido, but also from our preemptive audience questions, and it's about accessibility. I know, Mitch, you did a great presentation earlier about accessibility tooling and mindfulness at an agency. And so let's dig a little bit deeper into accessibility. When it comes to that, when it comes to accessibility consulting, do you have any accessibility experts at Rangle, and or perhaps some other guidelines that you'd like to share with us?
Me specifically?
Yes, we can start with Mitch for now.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of like consulting, we have various experts at Rangle that are experienced in varying degrees with accessibility. We do have like a community of practice sort of model where there are core members of that sort of team, and they're kind of thinking more about how we can make all of our projects have more of a baseline accessibility, and how to bring accessibility more into a focus during project kickoffs and things like that. In terms of consulting, like it's critical to have it be thought of at the beginning. I think that I've heard of like doing accessibility consulting is kind of like after the fact assessment of how accessible a system is or how accessible a product is. And that's like, it's helpful to know. It's better than not doing that at all. But I don't think it's something that we would definitely recommend at Rangle, because it's, it's kind of too late at that point, in the sense that not that it's too late, but that the investment you would need to make in order to kind of backport a lot of accessibility into your components is just a massive amount of effort, versus thinking and building accessibility into your product from the beginning.
For sure. Katrina, did you want to add on to this?
Sure, yeah. Like accessibility is something I'm pretty passionate about too. And like, yeah, I can definitely speak from experience. Like when we see that, like, let's do an accessibility audit on a design system, and it's kind of done in the middle or near the end, like there's always so many issues that kind of come up that, entail like a huge amount of effort to go back and go in some cases, redesign components, redesign how like certain things fundamentally behave. So like, I definitely always try to advocate for doing that earlier on, as early as possible. For myself in a design role, like I think it's important for designers to really familiarize themselves with the best practices around that. There's a lot less automated tooling available for designers. There's some, like maybe some plugins you could use to check for contrast, but really I think it's super important, not just for designers, but for everyone to just become very familiar themselves with the best practices, and not try to rely on like, oh, there will be an accessibility audit later, or we'll have an expert come in and tell us what to fix. Like, I think it's important that everyone does their part to understand each piece that you play. Like, make sure you're thinking about accessibility. It'll really help out to make sure that that's integrated early on and not just kind of left to the end.
For sure. Thank you for those insights. And I remember from your presentation earlier how a design system isn't accessible. So it's all about education and helping to supplement, whether it's the component library or the design principles of your company, always supplement that with guidelines and testing practices. So if, let's say, you consume a component, there's probably a blurb somewhere that says, did you test the interaction of this and the focus management of X? And as we were discussing accessibility, somebody asked another question on Slido related to that. So accessibility seems to be very important, but how important is it? And specifically, where do you draw the line in developing accessibility capabilities? Is it always a number one priority? Is there something you cannot budge on, or is there something you can? Do you have any, does anyone want to pitch in an experience for that?
I mean, I have thoughts around that, unless someone else wants to jump in.
You can start us off.
Sure. I mean, I think, at least my mindset personally around accessibility is, for me, it relates to the inclusive design principles. making sure that what we're designing is usable by all our users, not just by, the percentage of them who have full range of sight or full range of motion. And I think, there's sort of a piece of that it's about doing the right thing. So that's kind of my standpoint. But of course, there's also, depending on where you live, like legislation that is kind of coming in to make sure that organizations do adhere to those rules. So, there will be, I think, stricter rules around accessibility coming in, I think, mid-2021. I'm not sure if that's dependent on the size of your org or not, but we'll definitely see more cases of like maybe legal action against companies that don't adhere to those. So, of course, some clients will say like, that's a secondary priority. That always happens. But I think it's important to always try to advocate for it.
Yeah, those are great points. And I would just kind of reiterate that designing for accessibility is designing for everyone. It's the project that I'm working on. A bug with, for keyboard users or something like that would be just as critical as any other bug that we have if it prevents them from getting through the flow, if it prevents them from performing some action. And so we don't really differentiate. Designing for accessibility users or implementing those features improves the experience for everyone using the site. And so it should be treated with that level of value.
Very good. If anyone else feels like jumping in, feel free to speak up. This is a great topic for sure. It reminds me of an amusing anecdote where someone who doesn't work in front end or back end or design development, let's say someone who's in security or operations, some folks may think that accessibility does not apply to them, but it does. When it comes to what's it called, liabilities, for example, you mentioned legislation and perhaps hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of issues. That's like a liability that affects a team that doesn't necessarily design or develop front ends. So everyone plays a role in this, and I do like stressing that repeatedly. So thank you all for your insights. Lucy.
Yeah, I think just looking at the time, I think we have time for just one more question, and I'm just going to take it from YouTube. So it's a question from Kaleem. Actually, there was a bunch of questions about Radius, so folks wanted to know a little bit more. But this question is, how new is Radius and why haven't you used it yet? What do you see as the barrier to adopting it internally versus externally? And then I think one other question just to add to it is the example that you shared, was Radius used for that?
Right, I can jump into that. So I think I'll address the barriers to adopting it internally first, because it's not actually a tool that we built for ourselves to use. Like I said before during the presentation, Radius is almost a marketing tool. The point of Radius and the reason why we created this accelerator was to sort of get clients in the door and help them realize that we can actually get them building a design system much faster when partnering with Rangle versus trying to stand it up on their own. So one of the things that we say about Radius, and this is the truth, it's not just a marketing hook, we can get someone started with a design system in 3 to 6 months. So that depends on the size of the company and the complexity, but because we have so much experience with design systems, Rangle's been building design systems from the very early days. We've been doing it for years now. We know the best practices, and we wanted to create Radius to kind of collect all those best practices and decision making in one place. So, like I said, it's not a matter of us being like a product company where we have a design system for ourselves, and it has to have internal adoption. It's not really like that. You've heard from other people that we really do tend to enter the picture with the client when they already have started their own design system. And so we're never going to tell them, okay, throw it out. We've got what you need here, and it's called Radius. That's really not the point. It was always meant to be a tool that helps clients rather than a tool we use to scrap what they've done and start fresh. So kind of going back to that playbooks question, like we don't, insert a playbook on a client. We don't impose upon them. We meet them where they are. In terms of how new Radius is, I think it's about a year old. And so the reason we haven't used it yet is kind of echoing what Matt said. We tend to meet clients who already have their design system started, and we're helping them push it forward. So that's the reason. There's, we're not going to impose it on anyone, like I said. So we'll use it when the right time comes.
Great. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's a wrap. We're at 1:20. Does anybody have any, I guess, last minute ads or
Famous
questions?
quotes.
Yeah.
I could say that if you're trying to convince leadership of your organization to adopt a design system and they're a bit hesitant, start with some aspect of it that's really widely used, like some kind of use case that comes up over and over again, some element that gets used a lot, and implement that as a mini design system. Like document it, have a design, have the designers and developers talking to each other, put it into a component library, make it like a single component library, put it in its own repo, and just use that as kind of a core to kind of demonstrate what it can, what a design system can do as a starting point, and then maybe build it out from there.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. Good tips on getting started.
All right.
I think that's a wrap.
Matthew, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that that's how the project that I'm working on started. It was just a component library. We were taking components that were common, and we were really just supporting the one team even at first. And then years later, we've got 5 teams and something like 70 components and fully fledged design systems. So it really does grow and evolve. As Nick said, you just have to prove a small bit of value at first and just let people see the value in it, just a small piece of it, and then add on to it from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So as we say goodbye to the Rangle team, thank you all for showing up and for educating us all on what is conventional or unconventional wisdom with regards to design systems. Thank you for telling us all about Radius. Now we understand a little bit more about different ways to approach design systems, particularly in an agency setting. And with that, we'll say farewell to our guests and have some closing remarks. Thank you, Rangle team.
Thank you.
All right, then. And let's continue. Whew. Well, that was quite a meetup. And thank you all audience members for attending as well and asking your questions on YouTube as well as on Slido. We greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you came with certain expectations and maybe we met them. And if we didn't, please leave us feedback. There is a QR code here on the screen. If you have an iPhone, you can scan it with the camera. If you have an Android phone, it depends. But there's also a bit.ly link, bit.ly/DSCC tour-10. You can also post it there. There's also other ways to reach us and give us feedback. We have an email, hello@designsystems.community. Any way possible that's easy for you, please use it. We will listen. And thank you for attending our meetup.
I have one thing to add. So we're going to continue doing these series of highlighting and spotlighting companies and folks in the community who are building their own design systems. And so, yeah, if you have a suggestion or want to know more about a design system, feel free to reach out and we'll, reach out to those folks and hopefully get them on board and, talk about design systems some more.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.